internet open right there on YouTube to see that like the chat come in before I see it here, and it's not loaded yet. So I don't know if it's because we're not yet showing live, or there's a lag or delay, or I don't know. So
Yes.
uh, hi guys, how are you guys doing?
Amazing. How about you?
I'm pretty good, pretty good. A little bit tired, but it's Friday, so
game time can.
there it is. All right. How about you, Mike? You hear us? Mike's frozen.
Uh-oh.
There it is again. How about you, Chris?
I'm pretty good. I
Yeah.
actually took today off, so we were doing some little things around the property today. Never really got anything finished, but definitely made some progress on a couple of things. So that's always a nice feeling.
Nothing's ever finished. That's
Well, that's true. And then when you're doing one job, you look around and go, really like that, really like to do that. And you start brainstorming like 15 other jobs to do.
Yep.
That's the thing. There's always something to do, and as much as you like, as soon as you finish one job, there's like 5 more added to the list.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
You just
Yeah.
never get on top of it.
Spring's
so
always
hope-
worse for that.
Yeah, and it's worse at this time of year. Yeah, because I mean everything's about to start, and we want to be ready for the beginning of the growing season, and like for me, it's fishing, hunting. Hunting is about to start. Fishing is started, but we still have ice all over the place, so we can't really go fishing for now. But gardening stuff is started in the bedroom and upstairs, and there's stuff growing everywhere.
Yep. Trying to find spots for that now. I was out trying to fix the electric fence for the cows tonight, so I noticed the snow pulled everything down and stretched it out. And then I was trying to stretch it with a puller, pull it tight, and then it kept breaking. And it's like, oh, great. So I'm like, had to put a whole bunch of new wire up, and that was fun.
How are you, Mike?
Not too
Not
bad.
talking much.
I was outside cleaning up the yard today, getting everything ready for you guys to come visit.
Nice.
Cool.
It's coming quick. It's coming
It's
very
in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We're almost there.
Yep.
So everyone in the chat, I'm not gonna be saying hi to each and every one of you personally, because I mean there's gonna be people coming in and going out, and we're gonna have a little conversation up here. If you guys have any questions in the chat, put them in cap logs, please, so we can see. And we're gonna be talking about Earth Day today. It's Earth Day on April 22nd, so I figured it'd be a good topic for the roundtable discussion. So first question, what does that day mean to you guys, if it means anything?
Nothing. Nothing whatsoever.
Nothing.
No. I think what it was for me is when it first started, they were sending the kids home from school, and the kids would be like, we have to turn out the lights at this hour, this time for 1 hour. And I'm like, why? Because of Earth Day. I'm like, okay, so the power plant's still generating electricity. We're still getting charged for delivery. Like, to me, it was just, government or whoever enforcing their will upon us. And I also see all of these days as, I want to say, wishful thinking and that sort of stuff. I'm like, why is it limited to one day? Why not every day? Oh, I can't pick up garbage today. It's not Earth Day. Oh, I can't plant a tree today. It's not Earth Day. So to me, it's like every day you have to be conscious of that, not just one day or 1 month or.
It's like Valentine's Day. You should tell your wife you love her.
Exactly. Every morning when you wake up, when you go to bed, you got to keep that in the forefront of your mind. It's not like, today's the day I get to show my affection for the earth.
How about you, Chris?
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, Yeah, it's been going on for quite a while, and I think when it first started, it was very much like just trying to plant that seed in somebody's mind, potentially. I do kind of feel a little bit like we have days for everything now, but I still think it's like what you said, the ideal of doing things like picking garbage up, planting trees, like all the things that sort of you would think of or in connotation with Earth Day. It's like they're still good ideas. So I think the principle's still good, even if wrapping it up in one day to feel good isn't necessarily the best idea. Not downplaying it at all, but just
Yeah, there was a huge discussion within the family when Earth Day came out. My niece is really, really into that type of thing, trying to save the planet and everything. So, like, we had talks of like your carbon footprint and everything like that. But living out here, I'm at a negative carbon footprint anyway. So, like, my Earth Day is okay. Maybe I'll, go out and clean up along the road, some of the beer cans that happen to be on the ditch or something.
Yeah, I get all of your points. I whenever I think about Earth Day, I always have that, the conversation that Rocket in Avengers had with Peter Quill when he's asking, "What did the galaxy ever done for you? Like, what did the planet ever done for you?" Well, I happen to be one of the guy that lives on it. Like you guys said, we can't just stop on one day to do things just on today. Like I haven't done anything today but work, but I think it's more of a let's get a conversation going and let's try to bring everyone some awareness about good things we can do. And talking about what we can do, what do you guys think is a good thing to do for the planet, besides picking up garbage as a homesteader?
Definitely planting trees is a big one for us. Planting more bushes, planting more shrubs, creating more habitat for animals. It's great for animals. It's great for oxygen. Basically, looking after what we can look after. So our property is, kind of our project where we're going to make it as green as we possibly can. And, hopefully everyone else can do the same.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's levels to it. To have a non-straightforward answer, it kind of depends on your situation, right? So if you put blinders on and just look at those of us who are homesteading, if you're just starting, say this is your first year, then the very act of growing some of your own food, you're still helping, right? Just by doing that. But then you can keep going with it. Like Darren said, you can do things like planting trees. They could be edible or not edible. You can do things like closing loops on some of your systems where you reduce your inputs, and you can just keep layering on top of that. But I think that we're potentially a group of people that even at level 1, we're doing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons, like you were saying.
Oh, Mike's frozen again.
Oh,
Still there, Mike?
no, I think he's froze.
Yeah.
I think he will probably get disconnected for a few minutes again. Yeah. Like I mean, I kind of do the same thing. Try to plant trees. There's so much we can do, but at the same time, like we want to grow food. I mean, each and every one of us want to grow food. But by growing food, we bring in like the ecosystem. I think it was one of you two made a video about the whole ecosystem that you had. Was it? I don't remember which
Would have
one.
been Chris.
You. Chris?
Probably. We talked
Like, I mean,
a bit.
how you can have the wild animals coming in and doing something good for your property while, you know, the plants and the wild plants and the weeds and all that stuff, they all have a purpose. And if you can grow your own food without disturbing that aspect too much, I think that's even better because you bring in the insects, you bring in the bees, you bring in the butterflies and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, each and every one of those things are a good thing.
I think that's a bit of a compromise too, right? Because essentially, I think I've said it before, we're not a plant, so we can't actually produce our own energy on our own, right? So we always have a footprint impact. But like I say, if you're starting to grow food in your backyard, it doesn't require any clearing or any of that sort of stuff. Just you're taking some of your lawn and converting it to garden. That's still huge because it didn't have to travel anywhere. It's going to be intrinsically healthier for you, all these other things, right? And then you can just keep layering and layering and layering on top of that for no ends, which I think is like it's almost like the permaculture idea, right? For some of its flaws, some of its strong parts is looking at that. You know, we're not separate over here. We're actually part of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say something, and I read Ren's comment there, and I completely forgot what I was going to say. It happens. It happens.
I think during this process too is teaching the kids, because
Yeah.
you know, I think from what I've seen now is the kids come home from school and, you know, they have the ideas in their mind, they have the theory in their mind, they have, you know, what they have been told is, you know, happening around the world, but they haven't been taught how to put it into practice. So, you know, we're still after the kids to, you know, throw the banana peels in the compost instead of the garbage. Like it, like, okay,
Things
if
that,
if the school and everybody else is so big on that kind of thing, why is that not something that is already habit? It to me, it just baffles my mind.
Yep. You can answer, Mike. It's your turn. Your time to
Sorry
shine.
about that. Everything kind of shut down on me and restarted. Yeah, no, I mean, like Darren was saying, out here we throw all of our food scraps into a pile and it becomes, you know, fertilizer and new soil over time.
Mhm.
We've taken every scrap of, like, you know, cardboard and plastic, and we recycle everything out here. They've got a pretty good system at the dump where every bucket of recycling you get a free bag for garbage. So, I mean, there's a pretty good system in place for that. But yeah,
There's a good incentive.
Yep. And I think, like, Chris had a point there where, you know, there's so much more than just growing food that's good for the whole environment. I mean, the fact that you can grow your own food means that you might not go to the grocery store later on tonight and not use as much gas, as much, like, make as much pollution and stuff like that. So there's so much aspect to think about. I mean, we're not gonna sit here and talk about it for days, but we could if we wanted to, probably, especially with Chris there. You could come up with a few subjects.
I'll,
Even just
I'll add one thing there about kind of the Earth Day and how it sort of intertwines with homesteading too. Maybe for us, because we're all in some stage of essentially trying to be more self-sufficient, which is putting you down that road automatically to some degree. Maybe it's better as a day of reflection on sort of it all takes time, right?
mhm.
So if maybe it's better to look at it as a day of like, okay, where am I or compared to where I was last year? It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Because of that continued layered effect.
Yeah.
another aspect too is going back to like the planting and doing the gardening and all that. You know, for us up here too, I see it as also improving the soil conditions. So, having a huge area up here that is just sand, not much grows up here like the pine does and the moss does and the blueberries do. But, we've seen in other countries where that kind of environment ecosystem, it can quickly be converted into desert because there's not that healthy soil. There's not the bugs and other stuff and symbiosis happening with the soil and all that. So the more we can actually convert our sand into better soil and continue that process of permaculture, the better I think it is too.
Mm-hmm. All good points. My next question, I guess, would be more on the YouTube side. It has a YouTuber that also does the homestead. What do you think is a good approach to deliver a message, to try to help the planet without going too deep into it? Like, I mean, we all grow our own fruit trees and veggies and stuff like that, but is there anything that you think that we can all use in our videos maybe to show a little bit more about that aspect?
I think just the teaching for me is, and I don't do much of it, but I try to do it in a funny way too. But, if I can put in some points about, compost instead of throw your food in the garbage, or, use your weed cuttings or trimmings from the trees for wood chips and mulch and that kind of stuff. Do that. Like, for me, it's just getting that kind of message across and that kind of teaching across.
Good point.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the teaching is the teaching is the tool, right? Because the one thing, and I think this is where, going back to your point, Darren, that you made about the schools, right? If kids come, I'm going to narrow it to kids. If they come home and they've learned it, but they haven't experienced it, one thing we can do through video is you're kind of living vicariously. Somebody who's watching you can see that, well, hey, I can see how they did it. I can see how it works now, right? As opposed to just the theory behind it. I think the hard part with getting that message across is it still takes time. And the internet is not too kind time. So the one hard part, I think, is telling your story and teaching in a meaningful enough way to engage with people where they want to follow along, because then they really get the best information out of it, or come away with the best information.
I'm hoping that once I get the homestead built, that I can get into living with the surrounding environment, having it working for me rather than working against it. And my hope is that, like, I can have, because I found today there's tons of water shedding down the hill, down my driveway, and I've had to divert it into one stream. So I was out with a pickaxe and just kind of making a little trough down my driveway, a little creek. So simple things like that, where if I can get that all diverted right down to a pond, it'll feed water to all my livestock, all my animals, and then I will never have to go out and water again. And simple things like that I can appeal to, not the lazy side of humanity, but we all like to kick back and take it easy. And if you can have nature working for you, then hopefully that is a good example.
Totally. Question that I'm pretty sure Darren will like. You're not gonna like it. If you were in charge, I mean, Prime Minister, President, what is the first thing you would do on the environmental side to help the planet?
There'd be a bunch, actually. So, one of the things would be immediately take off sales tax for any plants, seeds, that kind of stuff. That should not be there. Get rid of the carbon tax. I hate that. That to me is just a tax grab. It's not anything that's actually helping the environment. I'd try and figure out something for the shipping lanes in like the St. Lawrence and other parts of Canada as well. Instead of having the big freighters come down, I don't know. There's companies out there now that do sail, like deliver goods by old sailboats. I might try and make that happen in some way if it's kind of feasible. And if you don't like getting your oil, like Montreal, guess what? You're going to have to put in a pipeline. So, because oil's not coming by a sailing ship. So, I'd try and do some stuff like that. I know there's been a number of legislations in the past. We won't go into which government did what, but there is protection on a lot of land. I'd like to probably see more, but I'd also take away some of that protection as well, because I know farmers that, part of their land got, suddenly it was like environmentally protected if you have this on your property. Well, then they tore out the swamp, or they filled in the swamp just because now it's done. Now you can't do anything with that. So it's not protected anymore if there's nothing there. So a lot of farmers, you think it's good for someone to protect an area of their property. Well, before the legislation comes in, they fill in the pond to get rid of that animal that might have been there. I'd probably give tax rebates or something like that to help farmers also do what they can to do regenerative agriculture. For some of the bigger farms and that kind of stuff, it's not feasible, but trying to work with them to, if they turn 1/20th of their one field into, say, wildlife habitat or something, then maybe we could do some sort of tax break for that or something, So there's a lot I'd kind of do to not only stop shipping. I hate the shipping from all over the world coming here, going down our coastlines and down the St. Lawrence and that sort of stuff. I get rid of a lot of the tax. I'd put money back into the oil industry, as much as most people don't like it and that sort of thing. I think that is a much more viable option right now for a lot of things. Same with natural gas, nuclear energy. I think it's a better option right now than solar and wind. Now, if we could help solar and wind companies actually get better technology, get better at providing good quality stuff. Like, if you can't build a solar garden light to last more than a month, we have a problem. So those are some of the things I'd start doing anyway.
Well, those are good ones. Boy, where do I start?
Take your time. Take your time.
I think you've got a really good point about the tax idea, because really money, I'm going to say it, we live in a world where money makes the world go round, right? So I'm going to start at the carbon tax, just because it's in place. I wouldn't scrap it, but I think it needs. But I think it needs a significant. But I think it needs a significant overhaul, because if it's, this is where taxation.
I don't know if we can still be friends now, Chris.
Well, let me finish. Let me finish. You'll have to let me get there. But taxation, it's usually negative, right? But there is ways to put it's going to sound funny. There's ways to put positive spin on it. So if it's not all about generating revenue, which is where I do agree with you right now, I think that is reason.
Where we are now.
That's the reason. It's sort of false, and I think I'm coming from somebody who's kind of versed in environmental legislation, so I can kind of tell you from experience. There are a few pieces of environmental legislation and policy that are kind of there as showpieces.
Yeah.
But if the intent is to tax things that, I'm going super high level, produce carbon, your example about the wetland is an excellent one, because scientifically speaking, wetlands are an excellent way to sequester carbon.
Yeah.
But right now, and I'm going to go to your farmer example, there's no monetary reason for a farmer to leave the wetland.
Nope.
It economically, it makes more sense to convert it into cropland or pasture land or what have you. But if that has a value, and you keep the tax in place, but you also give either, whether it's a return or a tax break, or there's different ways to do it, but you basically reward those who are either doing things that reduce that carbon footprint or are maintaining environments that also reduce it. And that's, I think, huge, because you could be going right down to a suburban garden. Your vegetables that you put in, there are ways you could actually calculate that. Now, they don't sequester carbon for the whole year, so your tax break for that is not necessarily going to be as great as somebody who owns, 12,000 acres of natural pasture and, tall grass prairie, which is a huge uptaker of carbon. So if it was really being done for the right reasons, you have to reward people for doing the right thing. And right now, there's a lot of environmental stuff where nobody's getting the reward. Yep. Another thing about farmers, there are countries that there are, again, tax breaks or other incentives for farmers, like you said, leaving certain areas. Now, that can get into a whole tangled web of, well, how do you decide and this, that, and whatever. But I think the core principle that really needs, and maybe this is where something like Earth Day is useful, because I think the core principle is, right now, Western society is essentially structured economically that we live here, nature's over here, and we do all of our industrial building and everything else here. And whether that's agricultural production of crops or shipping or whatever it is, and we segregate those things so that we need to have so much percentage of pristine environment put aside and so much intensive urban development, and you see where it's going. But you're always in an environment, you're always in a habitat, and to look at it so black and white as this is what it's zoned and this is what is permitted here doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I think the next step, I'm just picking on the carbon tax here, but the next step is to start looking at some other policies of, rather than, and I should say too, this is where this one's getting complicated, so I apologize, but there are some habitats and some environments that we should just say, no, you don't go in there, you don't do X, because once you've done X damage, it will never repair itself in our lifetime or our children's lifetime, or, you can just see the exponential, whatever. But those are more or less not the norm, because let's face it, we've already, and we as in humans, have already just about altered every environment on the planet. There are very few that we have never. And I think getting rid of that ideology that nature and environment's over here and we do everything over here, economics, environment, and natural resources, nature, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And keeping that separate is not going to be a popular idea, but keeping it separate, it's destined for failure, essentially. Mm-hmm. I could keep going, but I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, I mean, I try and stay away from everything I can. I don't look into politics at all because of how corrupt it is, and I just I try and stay away from it as much as I can. Every politician I've ever met has spun everything that I could ask into whatever story they want, and then by the time they're done, I've been like, I forget what the heck I asked. And so that, I mean, that being said, if I was ever put into that position, I'd have like trying to put into place some some sort of tax against all these corporations that use like sprays on crops and give more bonuses like tax refunds, rebates, whatever it takes to get more of a community of small farms rather than large farms. I think the large farms trying to produce so much, they're going into genetically modified. They're spraying tons of crops with all these chemicals, and I mean that's being incorporated into our bodies. And there's tons of studies, that could link all that to different ailing effects and things. So I think it would be better served if we had entire communities of small farms that were organic rather than huge, 2,000 to 3,000 acre farms that do nothing but make corn for ethanol. You know, um, yeah, I agree with. We've all got some very good points where we should look more into living a symbiotic relationship with our environments rather than a parasitic. And right now, it's there's so many things in the movies that just kind of show us as we are a parasite on the planet. We're just in a consumer-based economy. Use something once and it's used up. The solar light only lasted a month. Time to throw it in the trash, and there goes some more plastic into the environment, which will probably be here for 150 years if if it ever decomposes. I'd have to even look into that.
Yep, and I kind of agree with Darren and Chris somewhere in the middle about the carbon tax. Um, I I kind of like to understand why they do things, and I think the idea behind it wasn't so bad, but because there's a but, they need to realize that they made a mistake and take it out. I mean, to the point, I think that's just the way I see it. I think the idea was to limit people from traveling, for with not using as much gas, thinking that if they tax it more, people are not going to travel as much and it will not create as much pollution and stuff. But people need to go to work. People need to travel. People want to, especially since we've been pretty much stuck home for 2 years now. People want to get out. People want to explore the world. People want to go and see each other. I think that they have to realize that it doesn't make any sense.
Buddy, Scotland's calling, man.
But the
So
one thing about it too, though, because you make a really good point, going back to the money kind of being the rule of everything, which it is for us all, unfortunately, in some ways. When you like, there's been some talk about bigger corporations or bigger entities, right? If they're taxed for something, so if they're hit with we're just going to keep going with the carbon tax here. If they're hit with that tax, they're passing it on to the consumer, and this is the point that I'm sort of getting at. It's like if our example, I own 38 acres of property. I haven't ripped out all the trees. I haven't drained the ponds and the wetlands. I haven't this, that, and whatever. Some of it's pasture, some of it's orchard, some of it's rock barren, some of it's wetland, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things, really about carbon, all of those things do have a value because they're plants, right? It's plants, to put it very simply. So if the companies get dinged for the tax, and then we also get dinged for the tax, but we get no reward for doing the right thing,
yeah,
then
and that's the
it
issue.
never fixed the problem it's only putting more money in the government's hand because of the tax, but
Yeah.
it didn't actually address anything. But collecting that tax from those who don't want to do the right thing, I'm just going to say it that way, is the incentive for people to do things the right way. Because if Darren, if you've got a huge cattail wetland on half your property is a cattail wetland, and you get no monetary benefit from that, and I know as individuals, there are values there, but in a world ruled by money, there is no incentive. You're still taxed on that as land tax. You're still etc. But
Yeah. And if you look at a protected property like that right now, which some are, you can't do anything with it, and you get no reward for buying it or having it. It's just,
Yet that I'm picking on the wetlands in particular. It doesn't matter what wetland it is, but yet wetlands, it's again very, very scientifically proven. They're extremely important for a huge number of reasons, and carbon is only one. Yet we still, as a society, as a collection of humans who understand this, still have not been able to, under this model of economics, put a value on that so that we stop destroying them, because that's only destroying us faster. Even though you can't directly use it, it helps offset some of our, and it gets complicated and gray and whatever, but higher level thinking here. Why are we still draining wetlands?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, they're trying to give people rebates if we go with the electric cars. That's just one example, but why not do the same thing like Darren was saying earlier? Remove the tax from seeds. Why not give people, reasons to go and buy trees, apple trees, different kind of fruit trees, anything really, to just plant trees on your property.
Why not
people have big lands, big fields.
Why not give anybody who grows a garden, a vegetable garden, some a break on their land tax?
Exactly.
If you're talking about decentralizing, that's a huge incentive to do it. That being said, decentralizing doesn't accumulate wealth in any one person's hand or one entity's hand, right?
And you take a look at some places, you're not allowed to do a wildflower garden. You're not allowed to let the grass grow up beyond a certain height. You're not allowed to, do anything like that because of like homeowners associations or bylaws or that kind of thing. It's crazy.
But if you took a top-down approach to that, even just thinking, I'm gonna skip federal for a moment and just go to provincial or territorial.
Yeah.
If that was something, because in all provinces, it's the provincial or territorial government that deals with planning, right?
Yeah.
And then municipalities administer it. But if that's the mandate that the powers to be have spoken that this is an important thing for us to do, to have a garden, just pick that.
Then the municipalities can't do anything.
Well, if they choose to have bylaws on the books that prohibit that, etc., then that's their choice.
Yeah.
And you're eventually.
Guess what? You're not getting your roads paved.
Well.
Yeah. Something like that. I'd be like, yeah.
Because most people, I mean, as homesteaders, we're a minority.
Bring down the Thor hammer on them. Like,
but if you're a minority, we're doing this voluntarily. But a lot of people, and I will acknowledge, because it'll probably come up in the chat, and I don't want to sound like I'm saying, well, everybody should just do it regardless of circumstances, because there are people that don't have circumstances that allow them to do it. Those are not the people I'm talking about. But there are a lot of people that have some circumstances that they could do it. They could have a garden, and they don't. Most people, if there's no incentive, and growing food that tastes good and is healthy for you doesn't seem to be a big enough incentive, or we'd all have gardens. But a monetary incentive, you want to see change quick.
Yeah, you know what? Health incentive is not going to be huge. I mean, look at it in the States. I don't know how many. I was one of them. Like, I'd go to the store and like a little Debbie cupcake box, and then I'd take it home, and that would be gone that night. So, I mean, you couldn't convince me, and I was smoking for 14 years of my life. Like, as many chemicals as I took in, being in the service and like, on the base where I'd have two 60 kilowatt diesel generators running. You think they were kicking out clean energy or clean smoke or anything? No, no. That was back in 2000. So you couldn't have convinced me that, I should be concerned about my health, and especially until I was in my mid 40s, like where it actually started catching up to me. Nah, you couldn't convince me. I'll live forever, or I'll be in Valhalla. It doesn't matter. But and one thing that Remy brought up, they were given rebates for having an electric car, and I've looked into it, and right now, if you get solar energy, it's basically carbon neutral because it takes so many resources to make the panels, the batteries, everything, that by the time you get done with it, you're still you're carbon neutral for 10, 15 years, where then you have to replace your batteries and you're back into it again. So like there's so many different technologies I think that have been buried because of, well, the oil companies and everybody's money, they've got into it, So I
It's
think,
creating
yeah,
creating the illusion at the high level that there's change and there's a desire to change and there's a desire to do the right thing, but then putting the onus on every single one of us as individuals to do the right thing, foot the bill for it.
It's all for votes.
Yeah,
that's all it is. Every 4 years in the States, it's all it is. 4 years come around, okay, carbon neutral. You gotta, get electric cars. I've seen electric car stations where you could recharge your car. It had a diesel generator hooked up to it. Like, that's not carbon friendly, but
You got to get the electricity from somewhere.
I know.
Batteries don't produce electricity; they just store it.
Yep. Oh, don't get me. There's a whole nother thing, hydroelectric, because in some ways hydroelectric is great, right? Because the water is running anyways. The biggest negative to hydroelectric is having to dam it and having to block fish passage, because this goes directly into even homesteading, trying to produce your own food.
That's why my thought would be is we allow people to do it on like a micro scale. So if I had a creek running through, then I should be able to put in some sort of hydroelectric something to be able to run lights or charge some batteries or run a fan, that sort of thing.
No, you can on your own place. The main problem is trying to put it back into the system is it's inconsistent. So you don't have steady power, so it's not clean. You have like highs and lows, and that is more taxing on the actual system than without it actually putting anything in, which is why
doesn't need to go back into the system. It needs to go into 1 or 2 houses, 3 houses. Like,
you're talking about
small
in city,
community,
microfit almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's interesting too, because like the other parts of the equation of that, and solar farms are the same thing, because I have worked around them too, right? Solar panels on your roof, well, your house is already occupying that space. You've already done that damage. But when you go out and you have a field of solar panels, because this is in Ontario where I've seen it quite a few times, where you're destroying habitats, displacing species that are at risk or rare, this type of thing, for the benefit that it gets you. But it's like, if you same thing. It's like it's the same. Sorry, it's the same thing as growing food. If you spread it out and you decentralize it, you could have, like what Darren's saying, you could actually have people in a lot of situations hooked up with something. Maybe solar panels aren't the solution everywhere. Maybe wind isn't the solution everywhere. Hydroelectric is certainly not going to be everywhere, but they're all options, and they can all be done. Yes, you still have the equipment, so you still have to manufacture that somewhere. You still have to get the raw materials for it. But like Darren said, we're still using the power anyways. You could decentralize the power, which then decentralizes the environmental impact, whether it's to fish passage or destruction of habitat, etc. And that's, again, that mindset of, don't do it over here, and we all live over here, and the habitat's over there. Like,
combine it all, make it all symbiotic. So again, across Canada, there's so many spots that could take advantage of very small hydroelectric opportunities. You know, one or two houses, uh, maybe a factory, like small factory. I'm not talking like, you know, Tesla or something like that, but you know, other places can take advantage of the wind. Other places can take advantage of solar. So combine it all into a system that works for, you know, very small communities. The whole, I hate cities. They just, to me, it's, you know, that's why we have these big corporations, these big mega plants, these big factory farms, these big dams, these massive solar arrays, you know, that's taking up farmland. You can't plant trees there. Nothing grows there because, you know, it's all scorched now. It's,
It requires a lot of life support.
yep.
Mhm.
A lot.
Yeah.
And
Anyway, next question.
well, I was kind of done on the questions. I mean, we're on a good subject here. One thing I can add, like we're talking about the money, how everything, like the government wants to tax everything to put money in their budget and stuff like that. But I know in the States it's a little bit different because healthcare is not paid by taxes.
Oh, don't get me
But
started on that.
no, but I'm just gonna say that if people eat healthy by growing their own
Two
food,
tier.
they're not gonna be hospitalized as much. You know, like you 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 might lose some money on the taxes from the seeds, for example. But then again, people are going to grow more stuff. They're not going to get as sick, and they're not going to land in the hospital, which we all know that the healthcare system is very, very expensive. Like sometimes you have to weigh in. Like, am I really losing at the end if I lose a couple of bucks here, and I can gain a lot more here? Like,
You're asking
There's
the
also-
government to think.
There's also a lot of money that changes hands, and there are entities that make a lot of money off healthcare.
Yeah.
I think that's the double-edged sword to it, because you are right at the individual level. I say this hesitantly because accidents can happen, and there can be congenital things, and all sorts of things can happen, and they will happen. But generally speaking, if you live a quote unquote healthier lifestyle, you're exactly right, Remy. You're less likely to. And you always get examples of somebody who turns around and says, well, I smoked cigarettes of this brand for 100 years and I'm fine. And it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily make that justifiable for everybody, right? Like, that's a syndrome that I find you can find it with homesteading too. You can always find an answer. This goes back to a common sense thing, which really common sense probably goes a lot.
It's not that common.
But it probably goes a lot hand in hand with some of the sort of bigger principles of Earth Day, which we're talking about, right? But you can, if you look hard enough, you will always be able to find somebody in a perceived position of authority, because the internet is full of people that you don't actually know. I will say that, including all four of us. But you'll always be able to find somebody that agrees with you. But if you're looking for something and the vast majority of the outcomes are kind of like, it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea. You've gone through 300 bad ideas, and you finally say, oh, there's the one that says I'm right. Common sense should probably kick in and say, do I really trust that answer? Without really scrutinizing it and critically thinking through it. That's a different topic too. But
Yeah, I mean, talking about everybody getting better incentives to eat healthier. It always comes back. That's why I don't want to talk about government. It always comes back for me is like it's the money, the bigger bang for the buck, right? And there's more money to be made on fixing the problems caused by eating unhealthy than there is to actually fixing people and getting them healthy.
fixing the symptoms, treating
Yeah.
the symptoms.
It's like, I mean, just to pick one thing, like if you were to have say cancer, well, it's more beneficial for those big companies. They'll make trillions and trillions of dollars on, you know, treating the symptoms rather than curing the disease. And that's, I think, the problem with our society nowadays. It's gotten to be where everybody's just out for themselves. Everybody's just out for the bigger money. They're just wanting to make more money.
Here's a thought. How many jobs, how many careers, how many professions, how many anything like that makes money off you guys being healthy and happy?
There are some, but
Name one. I'd love to hear it. I can't think of one.
the tourism industry.
Yeah, okay.
That would be one.
One out of a million.
I mean, not totally environmentally friendly still, because you're using, like, all these fossil fuels to travel all over the world, and until I could see that. But yeah, no, that does. You have to be in a good sort of way. That's a good point.
Well, and it's all about happiness too, right? Traveling is
Because you're unhappy where you are, so you'll be happier if you spend some money with us.
true, but it's wrapped up in a nice package of.
It's got a beautiful bow on it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a while back I had this big conversation with one of the pharmacists. He came over from Nova Scotia to come to work in our small area, and at some point we had those vending machines, that were selling like pops and chocolate and chips and stuff like that, and they removed them from the hospital. And I asked the pharmacist, like, why do you think they're removing that kind of stuff? Like, I mean, if I want to eat a bag of chips, it's my own choice. And the reply he gave me was, well, your choice has an impact on the healthcare system, because if you eat chocolate, if you eat chips, if you drink pop, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes, you're impacting the healthcare system. But like, I'm still wondering, like, why not
two-tier healthcare system?
Well, why not help people eat healthy? Like, even if you go to the store, what's cheaper, buy a bag of apples or a bag of chips?
Usually the chips.
And I have 5 kids. If I buy a bag of chips, we can all have a little snack. If I buy a bag of apple, there's 6 apples, one in the family's not eating. Like, it's.
You need to buy bigger bags of apples.
I know.
You bring up a good point too, kind of going back to the sort of the general topic of Earth Day and sort of the environmental spin of homesteading in a way. Your example on the healthcare is where it gets messy, because we all grow food. We all just ignore economics for a moment. We all are doing it because we think it's a good idea. It is possible that there are people on the planet that don't think it's a good idea, or that it's not a good idea for them to do it. And so then that's where, like, the example of the vending machine is a little bit of a gray ethical when you talk about, like, I'm going to say the word, but freedoms, because it does make sense in the institution, right? Because a hospital, that's an institution it's about healthcare. There's certain standards and oaths and things that are supposed to go along with it. There's an ethical, and there's the kicker, there's an ethical stance of that institution, right? So that institution, because of their ethical stance, can make that decision to be like, no, we don't want to have a vending machine full of pop, right? But this is where, as much as it would be great to be able to change some of the things across even just Canada, let alone greater, you are going to run into somebody somewhere saying, well, that's, if I want to fit, even though I just went on a whole tirade about wetlands and why we shouldn't fill them in, and it's ridiculous that we still do it, there are still going to be people out there who are going to go, it's valueless, I can't do anything with it, all it does is breed mosquitoes, and the best thing I can ever do is drain it or fill it in. And what do you actually say to that? Because it becomes a personal preference thing, and not everybody trusts science for valid reasons, because science isn't always done in the name of proper science, because sometimes science is done in the spin of what is going to be monetarily beneficial. So you're in this constant negative spin where really the only thing we can do as individuals is show people that you can do it economically. You do have a better quality of life. Yeah, it's a lot of work. That's the hard one because
Yeah, how do you sell that, right?
you're not going to sell work. So you lose 50% of the population right there. And it's going to take time. Well, you lose another 25% there. So you're left with what, that? This 25% of the population that might, which is why we're a minority, right? But through going back to the YouTube example, we have a portal that we can do something that our ancestors couldn't. And you can show the ups and downs. You can show the little tips and tricks, and all these sort of things. And then you can actually too show them. It's like, here, I got to the end of the year, and here's how many pounds of food I produced, and this is how much I saved. Right? When you can connect the dots, the hard part's keeping people's attention long enough.
I know.
Yeah. You also remember the vending machine is basically almost in a private facility, so they can do what they want. Not really private in Canada, but still they can do what they want. If they said we're banning potato chips across the board, you can't get them anywhere, well, that's a little different. But yeah, for the healthcare thing, I'm like, oh. So my reasons for two-tier are I spent 6 hours in emergency. My grandson sliced open the front of his forehead, cut himself on the coffee table. And I sat there with him crying and bleeding for 6 hours in the emergency room. And when they finally got the stitches in, it was too late. Or they didn't actually put stitches in because it was already too late. So they just bandaged it up and now he's got a nice scar on his forehead. However, if there was a two-tier system in Canada, I would have gladly paid $300, $400 to be done in half an hour, have them all stitched up, and yeah.
See, now there's an issue with that because I know I got caught with it down in the States when I was when Angie and I got first together. My daughter had to have 2 stitches put in her hand. Cost me $500, $250 per stitch, which is why.
But see, that's the thing where I say like two-tier would be good, even though some people don't like it. Whereas, say you don't have the money for that, well, then you can wait for, the public healthcare to provide it for you. So, and then, now we're getting way off topic. But I'd say like doctors would have to do a road. What's that?
I can bring it back around.
Yeah, okay. But I'm just saying in that situation, doctors would have to do a rotation. So go back and forth from public to private. So, you can go into private for a couple of years, make some big money, but then you'd have to do some time in the public to sort of, repay. I don't know how it would work or if it would work, but that's my kind of thought on that. All right, Chris, bring us back on topic.
Well, I think this notion of the two-tiered is interesting because although officially we don't have it, when we get into agriculture, we already do. It already exists, but it exists on the producer side of it. We are all the lower tier. We don't have the same, how do I use the word? Because I don't want to say anything too bad, but we're held to the same standards as the higher tier, yet going to say it, the higher tier is getting away with things that we don't all unanimously agree about. And it's still all driven by money. So as we're sitting here talking about like the environmental aspects of it, I think it was Remy maybe it was Mike mentioned about the corn for ethanol. Intrinsically, I don't have a problem with that. But when the incentive is so great to produce corn for ethanol, then you go back down like what you were saying, Darren, where you're just clearing every available inch of land. And I'm gonna bring this back to an Earth Day topic that was from the early days of this. It's like cutting down the Amazon.
Yeah.
A lot of us can sit in North America and go, well, that's bad. But yet, where is a large portion of beef coming from that's feeding North America? I'm going to just say North America. Especially the fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
And so you have people in those countries who are going, geez, and I'm paraphrasing, but I need to make a go of it, and this is my option. It's this, or I have to move to a city, right? Which we're not buffered. That's already happened here. The small farm is gone in North America. Now, the homestead of trying to do it for yourself, that's a different story. But the small farm where you have everybody farming, that's already been decided through this
Government regulation has killed that.
But it's essentially a two-tier
because
system.
you either have to stay the size we are and not get bigger, or you have to go full blown
and keep up with the Joneses on doing that.
Exactly.
So that's why I say
there is no
our
in between.
agricultural system is already two-tiered, and look what's happened.
Yeah,
we've all brought it up today about pesticides, herbicides, GMOs, destruction of habitats, et cetera, et cetera. Who's doing that? That's the big question. So how do you reverse that? You need fewer people do it up here. Well, you have fewer people up here, but you need less impact up here by more people down here being less dependent, which is part of a reflection too, right?
Less consumption.
And this is why I go back to the first tier is anybody who's growing any food, even if they're not doing it sustainably, you're taking step one. You're doing probably the biggest favor to the planet that you could ever do. Far greater than, and I don't downplay it, but you're doing something far greater than picking up garbage or, those are all good. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing to do. But you've started down a road that potentially allows for change.
The less people rely on the big systems, the better off. Mm-hmm. Both for you and everything else.
And talking about like impact for the environment, like Shawnee said down there, we all need to live in smaller homes. Like it used to be a family of 6.
Don't tell me what to do. Why do people always try and tell me what to do?
The minimum square foot for a home that you can get for a permit is 1,500 square foot now. Like, yes, that's the minimum. And so go back to like our grandparents who would grow up in a 900 square foot home with 8 kids, all living under the same roof or whatever. Why is that so? Why is it so bad? Like, did they
kids living under the same bed? Like,
it boggles my mind that we need 1,500 square foot as just like a 2-family home or a 2-kid family home. You know what I mean?
But then you also look at what was required as resources. The house may have been small, but we've talked about this before, but there was barns and outbuildings for livestock and equipment, and there was areas to store feed, and there was areas to store grains, and there was, at one point in time, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just saying it happened, there was a notion that it took 100 acres to feed a family. But that's more than feed. That's to allow them to harvest materials to build houses and build the outbuildings, and that's doing everything. And it may not actually be that unrealistic.
Houses were small because they didn't have that much sod.
There's that too.
Well, you only had so much sod to build the house, so you can build it like.
Yeah, and they were small because you really just slept there. You didn't really want to be in the sod house all day.
That's just it. You didn't need, multiple rooms for multiple stuff. It's just.
Is that where grounded come from? You're grounded. Sod room.
Yeah. But yeah, like the fact that you can't build something smaller baffles my mind. That's like. See, that's more government regulation telling us what we can and can't do. Like,
yeah.
Oh, and the worst. All right, here we go. Here's the worst. All right, so what I really hate and what really gets me going is when people say, well, the government should ban this, or the government should bring in some legislation to deal with this, or the government should, like there was one, what was it? Oh, I was looking for a bone crusher so that we could crush up the bones from our cows and our pigs and everything else to put it into the garden. So I posted on Facebook and someone said, well, the municipal government should be able to provide that for families. And I'm like, no. Keep the government out of that, because the first thing that happens is when a group of people get together and tell the government that they want a certain legislation to, limit something or prevent something, the government takes it and goes, okay,
You want us to take more power? Okay,
we'll take more power. But, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't write it the exact way that you wanted to. We wrote it a bit different. So now, we've tailored it to suit our needs a little better. And then people are like, what? This is not what we wanted. I'm like, well, that's what you got, because that's what you asked for. You asked for the government to help you out with something, and then they did it. But you didn't get what you wanted, because that's not what government does.
Highest quality, bought to you by the lowest bidder.
That's a big thing too. If you're just taking the term homesteading, right? If you go back to where that term actually comes from, the people who were doing it, there wasn't anybody helping them.
No,
you did have local communities as time went on, but you were doing it yourself. But there's more to the two-tiered system in a way, because you still have, kind of going back to the vending machine example. Don't you love how all these things just connect? We can connect dots on everything. This is a game where it's just like, okay, we're taking this idea, we're going to bring it back around to that
just
idea.
like everything else, it's all intertwined and interconnected.
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. But where was I going with this? Got excited. But just like the vending machine idea, again, us and most of the people I believe in the chat are of the same mindset that it makes sense to grow your own food in some capacity. And a lot of us would probably love to figure out closing some of those loops so that we're even less dependent. But you still have a percentage of the population that is the exact opposite. Which is that somebody else is going to provide it for me. And so I won't get into it, but there is potential that you do just naturally have a divergence, because that's the one thing about community too, right? Even at the smallest level, you always, throughout history, you always have splits and divides. The difference now is the splits and divides in the past, you moved away from each other so that there wasn't conflict. But now there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So
you bring up an interesting point too, because that kind of touches on the city. People who live in an apartment in the city, they love that. They love being able to go out for different meals every night. They love being able to stop by the grocery store and pick up something that day for dinner that, here's what I feel like tonight. I'm going to go grab it. How would you be able to change that mindset, do you think, into, starting to grow more food for themselves, or point out something beneficial for them to, start using your balcony to grow a few tomatoes, or grow some basil, or grow some rosemary or something like that,
It's simple. And this is what gets me is, remember I can't remember, it was a power outage, lasted like 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm timeline in my head is just messed up. It's gobbledygook. Yeah. So, but there was a time where the power went out for 2 weeks. And people were fighting over resources, and there was people fist fights at the gas station and stuff.
So what you're saying, we should just cut the power every so often?
I'm surprised people haven't learned from that alone. That would be a lesson. And I'm a hard-headed sucker. It takes me a lot to learn a lesson. I the hardware, no way.
This is where we start to go into the prepping mentality, though, right? Because essentially, the side of prepping, which is just being prepared for situations exactly like that, really is in line with sort of the old time growing your own food being sustainable, because you had no choice. And that's probably the big hard part, because now people have the choice. You have the choice. All right. You can go to the grocery store and buy something every single day. You can buy it fresh. You can buy fresh things that are completely out of season, that can't be grown in your area, or that are super subsidized. It's like, I'm going to say it, we're doing the experiment with the sweet potatoes in the fish aquarium. That's not something you can scale up, really, because it's not necessarily the most efficient. Because like what you were saying, Mike, it's not working with nature. We live in an environment where things don't grow. The plants do not grow for a significant portion of the year. We can change parameters, but to change those parameters require more resources and more technology, and more resources and more technology. Well, more resources are more resources. It's going to take more metal and glass and all the other things that we need. So I think that's another part of it too. We have to find another balance between technological advancement, because we wouldn't be here doing what we're doing now. We wouldn't be here, period, if it wasn't for technological advancement. And looking back, which I think is not really answering the question, but it's getting into another topic where you have to look back, because if a system isn't working now, I'm going to pick a bit of a hot topic without going down the line too much, but birds, it's not working.
I think I lost it again.
Well, it's not. Oh, we can hear you, but it's not working keeping thousands of birds in confinement to try to isolate them from the world so that they don't get sick. It's not working. Do we need collectively to sit down and be like, should we maybe go back? Because it was working at one point. The downside is some people aren't going to be able to enjoy chicken, because we're not going to be able to go back and feed everybody who's in the city, to put it bluntly.
Well, I think that's another thing is like, how do you tell people that they shouldn't be able to enjoy some of the food that they enjoy? Like, why do I deserve to eat pineapple where I'm located?
Oh, that's getting super
Because
deep.
it's good.
In my mind, it's like, ooh, I need to, like, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I need to stop eating pineapple, because I'm like, I have other stuff around here that grows naturally for me. The blueberries, the strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, all of that kind of stuff. It's like, that's what I should be eating, not pineapples.
And then this goes back to the planning too, where when we build communities nowadays, we tend to bulldoze everything, which we can do at a speed far greater than we've ever been able to do in history ever. We bulldoze everything, get rid of everything that's naturally occurring there or naturalized occurring there, and start with a blank slate, which potentially is also another issue, because you're wiping out all that locally available X, Y, and Z. And I know there's lots of levels to that too, but
Wanted to make sure Darren sees it.
I've never heard of that. You're man. I like it.
Awesome.
It's gonna be the title of your next video. I'm so dang man.
Oh man.
You're giving him ideas there. How do you guys think that the rise in cost of everything, like we've been talking about the rise in gas and food, how do you think is going to affect like the way people live in the future? As like, do you think people are going to grow more stuff in their own garden? Do you think more people are going to have a garden?
I think people are going to have to, like, they're going to have to figure out something, because, I think back to when my one grandmother was still alive, and she was on like the pension or whatever it was, she could barely afford her apartment. So I remember my mom and my aunt and stuff doing grocery shopping for her just to get her some extra supplies. And then, more taxes would come in, bus fares would go up, apartment would have to raise the cost of the apartment because of, their costs going up, and the pension never increased. It's just like, it just took. So nowadays, years later, I look at how is it possible for some of the older folks or people who are on pensions or a set income or something able to survive right now with all the increases that are happening? They got to be able to do something else just to help supplement that, or
likely they won't be able to if other generations don't step up and start to grow food. And I think this is coming back around to the question of how to incentivize people. Well, I didn't answer that question straightforwardly, but
That was kind of a political answer. You went like around.
I kind of went around the block to get there, but it's back now. So it's negative reinforcement. Essentially, is what the era we are in right now.
Negative reinforcement seems to work, though. That's the thing, I guess. Like,
you will get results, but the negative is you might not get the best results.
Right. Yeah.
Because this is the level thing again, right? Growing any food of any kind is a good thing. There's no question about that. Anything you grow. I'm going to say it. If you go out and you buy broiler chickens because that's all you can do, and you raise them in your backyard, you are still doing better.
Here you go again, picking on me.
Well, not picking on you, but you're still doing better than not doing it. But you're still dependent on the same entities to get those birds.
Yeah.
They're still profiting.
Yeah.
In fact, they may be profiting more because they've invested nothing in those birds. So it's to their benefit. You're just changing the paradigm of money flow, cash flow.
Yeah.
I think this is the scary part for me, having done this for so long, having saved seeds, kept breeds, it rhymes. Save seeds, keep breeds. To regular Dr. Zeus. But having done this for as long as I have, this is the part that I have seen happen, the ups and downs. People get into it, then they get out of it. Then they get into it, then they get out of it. So you get into it and go, I want some nice heritage chickens. I'm just going to put blinders on for chickens for a moment. And you get a rare breed. You were lucky enough to get it. And then you decide a few years later, oh, it's not working, blah, 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 blah. And you dump them. You're actually hurting us all more. And I think this is the negative to the negative reinforcement, because right now people, and I think for the last 2 years it's been there too, but people feel that frantic anxiety of I've got to grow something. And now it's getting more because it's like, I've got to grow something or I'm not going to have food. So, but they don't, most people don't know. Most of the people doing that, they don't know how to grow it. They've never saved seeds. They don't know how to breed animals. They don't know how to they have none of those skills. That's in itself not a bad thing, but it's a recipe for disaster, because you're going to have, I'm going to do the Sesame Street thing. You're going to have somebody going, hey, I got broilers for you. Here, buy my broilers. These are the best broilers. But they're going to do the same thing that they're doing to the big farmers. But you got to come back and get them from me because you can't breed them yourself. You can't do it yourself. That's what the largest entities who shall remain, those who shall remain nameless, they who shall not be named, have gotten to the position of power, because they have, it's not even the producer that's the problem anymore. The large scale producer who's growing broiler chickens to feed the cities, they aren't the problem. There's a whole lot of problems that come from that paradigm, from diseases to pollution to destruction of land to even siphoning off when those birds are inside 24/7. All the food has to be brought to them. There is a whole argument to be said that those big broiler barns are directly competing with us for food. Even though we're growing them for food, they're competing with us for food because they need X amount of grain, which takes away the intrinsic value of the chicken, and you're working harder instead of smarter, because you've got to bring everything to that chicken, and it can't go out and use the food items that you would have been otherwise completely wasted, that you can't use.
And now that I feel so bad, I feel like I have to interject and say that's why we're growing our Chanticleer flock.
Ooh, I spilled water all over myself.
Look at how excited you got, Chris. That's just crazy.
But I do think it's valid. We all want to think positively. And I think we've sounded very negative. Well, I have, maybe. We've sounded very negative tonight as I mop up all this water that I spilled all over myself.
I think there was a lot of doom feeling to it, and it's.
But the doom has to be.
For feeling happy, that was a lot of doom in there, Chris.
I know. Well, hey, I have to admit, like, there was a lot of doom coming out of my mouth. I felt like horrible. Like, it's all bad.
It's all bad.
Well, I mean, that's what causes us to change. It's like, if you find out something that doesn't work, never a good thing. Like you didn't smack your thumb with a hammer and say, "Oh, well that worked out great. I should do it again." No, that taught you not to do that. Like that's what growth is. Growth is always painful, and it always sounds like doom, doom, doom. But that's what teaches us as humans to live, evolve, and grow.
Mhm.
I think I'm going to agree. I just because I see it came up, I'm going to agree with Caitlin's family farmstead. It's not really doom in a way; it's reality, and I think this is where, again, coming kind of a few ideas together again with the teaching, and we've all established that growing food is an excellent thing to do, and more people should do it. And you want to help the planet? There's your starting point, but you're at a point. The internet is both amazing and horrible at the same time because it's all about how loud you communicate, how present you are, and the promise, right? I keep using the broiler example, but when you can say, yeah, but my chicken's going to grow in 13 weeks and give you hundreds of pounds of food, no other chicken can do that. When people don't understand the dynamics of everything else that goes into actually creating something a sustainable interconnected web, that sounds amazing. That's no different than saying, hey, buy this sports car because it's the most powerful in town. Oh, that's great. But
Yay.
do I need that power? Do I need the gas bill? Do I need the... People don't think about that because it's like, oh, but
Do I need that pineapple? No, but I want it.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
society, in a nutshell. See, again, doom, doom, doom. We get back to where's everything, where's the economy going to go with all the prices rising and everything like that. I'm actually I've fallen down a few rabbit holes lately because the way everything is working, it's almost like we're going to see a shift in our lifetime economically from one currency standard to another. And everybody I've talked to has different theories and ideas, and they've got tons of proof and tons of literature to read on why their theory is correct. And so I've got a few things out there, but you just don't know. It seems like the world is on the brink of a shift, and that's what I see. I don't know why, but I feel that's where it's going to go. So
Interesting.
yeah, doom, doom, doom.
Doom.
It's like a cell almost ready to divide. It's reached that what is it? That maximum point where it either has to divide or implode on itself or something in a way. Which doesn't necessarily have to be doomy because some of the stuff we're talking about, a change is always scary because it's a change. You don't know what's going to happen on the other end. But there are some solutions hidden, and this is the problem. The solutions don't sound shiny.
No.
Right? They don't sound shiny.
It all started because we moved from the gold standard, and so all inflation is we print more money just because we got to pay off all this. Well, you just can print more money. That's just paper. It doesn't
Why do
actually
they have
be
to
valuable.
tax us if they can just print money?
Money doesn't grow on trees now. Wait a minute.
Keep us down. The man's keeping us down.
Even if it's made of oil, it's still made out of plant matter. Just really old plant matter.
Yeah.
But I had one thought. Oh, it's got to come back to me. It was
Here's one for you. Like, if we could get everyone in apartments just to grow their own herbs, can you imagine the actual plastic and garbage and transportation and production costs that would cut down on?
It'd be huge.
Like,
It wouldn't seem like very much at the individual level, but cumulatively,
yeah.
it would be huge.
Like, I remember before having the gardens and stuff, I was buying the rosemary, the chives, and those plastic things, or they'd come in the styrofoam with the plastic wrap, and you'd have to get them every week, and it's like, that adds up.
It's like $2 for a small pack. I was just at the grocery store. I mean, even for mint is growing freely in the wild.
Yeah.
Yet people pay for plastic to create more pollution.
You could get enough seeds and maybe a grow bag and that, and put it on your balcony in your apartment. And
I think a lot of it actually has to do with ignorance. Now, if you think about it, and not ignorance as in people are bad and ignorant. No, it's just a lack of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And it was never made more apparent to me because, okay, Angie's gonna kick my butt. But like there was this one time where when I was a kid, I grew up in both the city and in the country. Because every summer I'd go to my grandparents' cottage. I'd run through the woods, so I had a lot of both knowledge. However, like when we were living in the city, Angie wanted to go out and buy ferns for the house. And I looked at him like, why would we buy ferns? Like we can just drive outside the city, have a walk through the woods, and dig up our own.
Yep.
And it's simple things like that that just it's not the common forefront in the knowledge. Like you know it's out there, but it's distant. It's away in some other. It's up here and I'm here. You know, I'm separate from it. You got to get back to that connectivity or that connectiveness where everybody says, oh, you know, we could just take an hour drive and go for a walk in the woods, dig up all these plants and herbs and things, bring them back and grow them in our, you know, I don't know, our condo or our apartment. And then we have them. And they're perpetual.
I have two thoughts to that are completely different. Because one, you bring up a really good point that I was actually thinking of bringing up when you talk about grocery stores and ignorance in that lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The grocery store is if you walk through the grocery store, a lot of it doesn't tell you what it is, but it's intrinsically implied that somebody has sort of screened it and it's okay for you to eat.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing about knowledge, right? Because going for a walk in the woods, you actually kind of have to know yourself what it is. Not all ferns are edible. Not all mushrooms are edible. You know,
Not all
that kind of
store-bought
stuff.
lettuce is edible.
Well,
True.
but I think that takes the thought out of it, right? Because then there's no sort of. It sounds really bad. It sounds really doomy, but there's almost no personal accountability for it, right? Because somebody else has sort of made that choice for you, which I think goes back to another point about the
Personal responsibility.
Well, but that's
Can you
really
imagine if people had that again?
Well, that's what you end up doing with homesteading, right? When you're growing food, or you know, I've seen it in the chat too about pollinators and all of the things that go together. I just say growing food because the homesteading doesn't really cover it, and just getting back to that interconnected endeavor. But another point though is you still. I'm going to talk about tomatoes because tomatoes drive me nuts because tomatoes are dirt simple.
You haven't talked about squash tonight.
No, I haven't because I don't think squash is. I'm going to
We
say
almost made it a full episode, man. Come on.
All Darren's fault.
But squash is not necessarily.
No, go back to tomatoes.
Well, I'm going to say why squash wasn't brought up. Squash isn't accessible to everybody because if you're living in really close quarters with your neighbors, you couldn't necessarily. 800 meters is really far to keep your squash pure, right? So you can't actually do it. But everybody can do tomatoes. When it's only got to be 3 meters apart, you don't live 3 meters from your neighbor. You could figure it out. So tomatoes could be one of those things, and this is going back to the eating seasonally and not always fresh, right? Because the grocery store gives you the promise of it's always fresh, it's always fresh, it's always fresh. Well, fresh in the middle of the winter is coming with other environmental impacts because you had to change the environment at scale, which is different from growing a few things in your fish tank. You had to do it at scale to be able to make that fresh and not frozen or what have you, out of season or whatever. But
go beyond that. Like I bought an apple. I bought some apples at the grocery store a while ago, and I forgot about them. And I went back 2 months later. They hadn't started to rot.
Interesting.
You think? It scared the heck out of me. I'm like, what? I thought it was just an apple. Like,
an apple is never just an apple. An apple could be something completely different in disguise.
It's like a McDonald's hamburger. You don't have to put it in the fridge if you're going to save it. Just stick it on the counter.
Put it on the mantelpiece and show it off to you.
It used to be one of my camping tricks. I'd pick up a pack of McDonald's fries because those burn like candles. Seriously.
Well, oil will do that.
Yeah.
But in the personal accountability, in the knowledge, and sort of fighting the ignorance, like the tomato is a perfect example of you don't need a tomato industry, to be very frank. Even in town, maybe not in an apartment
industry.
Exactly. These are things where it sounds terrible because you're basically, you could make the argument you're taking jobs away from people, etc. But that's part of the problem. We all stopped growing our own food and started working other jobs. And that's why nobody feels they have the time or the energy or the interest at the end of the day after working 40 hours a week to do it. It takes a very determined person to do that. Most people give up at that's too much work. But that's part of the change too. There's another pitch for what would you do to change the paradigm for more environmentally friendly would be give more people more time. Because if they had more time, they could potentially do some of this stuff in conjunction with some of the other pieces of the puzzle.
See, that's the kicker, is time is the only true currency.
And I think it was it was Justin Rose that said at some
time
point.
for money, so your time is your currency that you're given.
Other stuff for money.
But it still takes your time.
That's true.
I think it was Justin Rose that said at some point that he wanted to grow his garden at first, and his dad told him, like, why do you want to grow your own food when you can just go to the grocery store and buy it?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the mentality that a lot of people have now. Why spend so much time in your garden when you can just go to the grocery store and buy the food right there? Like, I mean,
yeah,
people
you can
forget
buy
it. Like,
apples that never rot.
Yeah. But I mean, like, even if it takes you 8 hours to do that one thing, I mean, of course, it's not really, time wise, it's not necessarily time well spent. But at the same time, if you're home, sitting on your couch watching TV, why not being outside, sitting in your garden and, doing something good for your health?
I think a lot of people too need to be introduced to it and be shown not only how to do it, but the feeling you get from it as well. Like this summer when we did our green beans, I was like, it made me so happy, and I was like giggling all the time every time I went out to the garden because, like, oh my god, there's more. It's like, it was crazy until it got overwhelming, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna cut these down because it's overwhelming and there's too many. But most of the time it was like I got all giddy and happy, and the reward and the feeling, and what that does for your brain, just to be able to harvest all that and have it all grow is just, I don't think many people experience that or have that reward from a lot of things in their daily life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, it still goes back to the people don't understand. Because we've gotten that a lot of times. Why not just buy it? Like for years that's come up, because you can, and that's kind of that. You could argue maybe thrive versus survive. Maybe if you don't have to grow it, then a lot of people just look at it as, well, I don't have to do it. So the problem is, if you don't have the skills when you have to do it, it's not going to work.
And there's so many things that you can just grow, leave it there, let it be. And, and just before the fall hits, just go and grab it and eat it. You can plant strawberries, leave them there, not do anything. You're going to get strawberries for a few years. You won't need to buy them from the grocery store for at least a few weeks in the summer. You can plant chives, like we were talking about chives. Plant chives.
Chives are crazy. They grow everywhere, and they're hard to kill, which is awesome. Yeah. So like,
kind of vegetable you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like we've got them all over our place, and
just
it's
plant
great.
Plant it, and it'll grow.
But it still takes knowledge. It still takes there is an effort there to learn.
Yeah.
And I think the big push we're going to see in the next probably 2 to 5 years will be people will have the push because they won't have food, but whether or not they will actually have the push to learn is another thing. And that's kind of where I was going with the broiler example, right? Because that there are going to be bigger entities benefit greatly from it, because people are going, well, I have to grow it. I have to grow it, giving no thought into the other inputs, which goes directly into the the Earth Day theme, right? If how much inputs does it take to get the seed package from the store? Most people haven't thought of that, or the broiler, or the wiener pig, or the whatever, right?
Yeah.
When they don't, and this is kind of like the carbon thing. When you don't feel the pressure, people don't think about it. But when you feel the pressure economically, then maybe people will think about it. But I don't know. The doomy side of me thinks we're too late, because if you haven't started to learn now, you've got a lot of catching up to do. Doesn't mean people can't do it, because people are very resourceful. The non-doomy side of me wants to believe that people can see exactly like what you're saying, Darren. They can see the benefit. They can see the enjoyment. They can see the health benefit. They can see all of that, and they can critically think and use some common sense, and which we've established on the doom side of things, maybe in short supply, but they can use those powers of rationing that we as a species are fairly unique in having to change some things. And I think that's probably not that we have to end here by any means, but if you were closing out the Earth Day thing, I think that's the big point to it, is to get people to think about that, rationally think about things. It's not about feeling good because we picked up garbage or planted a tree or whatever. It's rationally thinking that every single action that we have as an individual in our lifetime has an impact on the planet. We leave a footprint, no matter what lifestyle we live, we leave one. But there are lifestyles where that footprint is a lot bigger than others.
You're saying I shouldn't get that mega yacht?
Well, you could get the mega yacht and convert it into a mobile grow up and grow all your vegetables. There's nothing saying you couldn't convert a boat into a completely usable growing apparatus. Could be done. Most people who can afford a yacht probably wouldn't do that, though.
Yeah.
Hi, Scott. Kaylin was saying that, a lot of people are growing flowers, and like they don't know that some of the flowers are actually edible. I mean, I had
Yeah.
chives here for like 2 years before I even realized that there were chives and there was something that I could eat.
We probably grow just as many flowers as vegetables. Like our container for our veggie seeds is the same size as the one for our flower seeds. And there's so many out there, like the nasturtiums, daylilies. The list goes on. Now my mind's blank, but borage, stuff like that. It's crazy.
But again, it all takes some knowledge, right? Knowing that they are edible, and then once they're edible, they're more
roses.
valuable. Well, yeah, that's a great one.
Yep.
And suddenly, it all of a sudden has more value.
Yeah,
it has its value as a pollinator and something.
Pansies. There's another one that grows like a weed, and you can eat them.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I'm out of questions. If you guys want to keep talking, go ahead. It's fun. It was a good subject. We've been going on for a little bit more than an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Any more questions in the chat?
I apologize. I keep going in and out of internet. It's just been a rough night out here, I think.
Looks fine on our end.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting topic I think that, and then this is probably where I lose people with that interconnectedness, because
but everything is interconnected, and it's like, one little ripple in the water has bigger effects. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think, I don't know if there's a better word for it, but I do think in the coming years, trying to close those circles is going to be a bigger topic. That sustainability gets thrown around a lot, but I don't know that it's always really understood what it means, right? Because again, grow anything if you're doing better than somebody who's not. But it may not necessarily be sustainable. It doesn't necessarily mean everything has to be sustainable, but looking at it through that lens, which is again why I beat my head against the table about tomatoes, because it's like you want something that you can grow hundreds of pounds of food and never have to, you buy them once or get them from somebody once. That's the plant, but you still have to learn about it. It's not. They're not shiny and fancy, and most people don't want to learn about them, but you still have to be really successful at it, I guess.
Yeah, just starting fresh. I'd say if someone isn't doing anything, the first thing I'd suggest, no matter where you live, you can do it, is start growing your own herbs. So if you do your own cooking or anything like that, start growing your own herbs: basil, rosemary, thyme, sage, savory, that sort of stuff. Really easy to grow. You can grow it inside an apartment, even if you don't have a balcony. You can grow it under a grow light. Something like that is, I'd say, the first place to start, and then expand from there.
And like Chris said, tomatoes, you could
Yep.
grow tomatoes almost everywhere.
Yeah.
You could do hanging plants. If you've got a little balcony, you can grow tomatoes out there. They just hang down. And herbs, like, can you imagine? That was one of my favorite things when Angie had her little herb garden and her salad garden. Salad garden was my favorite. She had me build a raised garden bed for her salad garden. We just go out there and clip and just have fresh salad every night. That was odd for me. Like, I grew up drinking no water, just Coke, and eating cookies and Pop-Tarts and stuff like that. So, like, for me to have that shift in my diet and in my mindset was huge.
Salad's a great one, but takes up a bit more space to be sort of continuous. So, you harvest one or a few leaves from one. You only, like, say romaine lettuce or something like that. You harvest a few leaves from it. The next day, you harvest a couple more, and suddenly that one's gone. So you need a bit more space to do lettuce and all that.
The succession.
Yeah.
I think that's a good success story, though, Mike. And that's something that, despite all the doom and gloom, I think capitalizing on the successes, like that one is a great one, right? It's like,
and I love that.
Life eating this and then switching to this, and it's like I notice the difference, whatever. Like, and repeating those are good because then it reinforces it in people's minds.
And I love that. We had a box outside our one door where we did lettuce, and we did arugula and mesclun and like mixes. So it was awesome, to be able to come out and every day just grab your salad right from there. Then we'd do a walk around the garden, grab nasturtiums, throw those in as well. And it's like, to be able to do that again, to change your eating, to be able to not pick it up packaged in the grocery store, to be able to have something healthy as well. That's just so awesome.
Totally.
Yeah.
If I was to do something different, or if I was starting from scratch right now, I think the only thing I would say I focus. Having focus at the beginning, and especially in today's world, having some focus will get you further ahead a lot quicker. But it's a daunting thing if you're just starting, because you still have that same temptation of buy this, buy that. This looks cool. That's shiny. This is whatever, right? Like, it's the same. We have so much variety right now available to us. That's a hard one because you still need to experiment a bit, but you still need to focus.
Yeah, my focus needs focus. Just ask my wife. I'm all over the place. Like, going out today, she was like, "What should we focus on?" It's like, the yard. Everywhere. We'll focus on this side of the planet.
Yeah.
Oh,
and two, if you're just getting started as well, to do lettuce or herbs or that kind of stuff, it's so easy to go out and get just a small bag of dirt, and then say use an old muffin tin, like, you know, you buy the muffins in the grocery store that are the clear top. That works as an automatic greenhouse that you can start stuff in. Plastic egg cartons, automatic greenhouse right there as well. So just that kind of stuff that you can find that you've already purchased something from the grocery store, just use that as well for, you know, starting your seeds in.
Recycling.
Yeah.
Very good Earth Day topic.
Yeah. Even those, you know, when you buy the chickens, the pre-cooked chickens, they come with a plastic.
Exactly.
A lot of people use that.
Yep. Those are great as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good ideas.
Yeah. Use get cans of beans, anything canned as well. Just save that can and start using that as a growing container.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the nice part with some of that stuff too is they're robust enough to be used time and time again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a definite big thing. Like we switched to their dish pans you can get for washing, like a wash basin for under our seed trays, because when we used to buy the plastic, fairly thin plastic seed trays, and they always break, and you're lucky to kind of get a year out of them. And then it's like, well, then that's another one of those examples. We're still using a plastic tray, but that plastic tray, and it still takes resources and everything else to make that. But that plastic tray will last, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years, maybe more, versus the one that's, you know, not reusable.
Yep.
That's a definite big thing too. Think about your long-term, it's not goals, but just that long-term use of things, if you can. It's not always possible. There are some things where it's hard to get away from it, but.
And this year, we had a few of the broken trays, like you said. So the seed containers that we have, which have the holes on the bottom, we've actually just used some old Rubbermaid container lids and set the seed tray on that. Just anything like that that's going to, you know, hold the water from falling on the floor or table or whatever.
And all of that diverts stuff from landfills and this, that, and whatever too.
Mm-hmm. And if I was to start over, I'd probably move about 3 hours down south. Not too far from Rennes there, Jack and Lindsay. Man, we still have so much snow here. It's insane. Like I can't even think of starting anything right now. Like last year, this time of year, I remember on at the end of April, like this, like on the 22nd, actually, we were playing soccer outside. There's no way we're playing soccer right now. Like there's still at least 2 feet of snow in my yard, like everywhere. It's insane.
Just 3 hours. I mean, I might go for the Caribbean, South America, maybe. If it was safe, you know, I wasn't gonna get kidnapped, stuff like that. You know?
Then again, you face different growing conditions. It's
not even the growing conditions that get me. It's that everything living it grows even bigger, and there's more of them. The spiders, just like
spiders, snakes. There's no spiders and snakes in Moncton that are really dangerous, or Sussex. That'd be a nice place for me to go. I don't need to go that far from here. Like, I mean, I can just drive an hour down. They barely have any snow left. I'm sure Darren, you know exactly how I feel.
Yeah, we've got between a foot and 3 feet, depending on where it is in the woods or, you know, out on the front yard. But yeah, I head down to Quebec City for work every Monday, and it's like no one has snow down there.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Well, good news is most of the snow's already gone down here. Bad news is there's water everywhere.
But that still is a good news because there'll be water, there'll be moisture in the soil later.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to bring our rubber boots when we go over. Mike and Chris?
It's a good idea, probably.
We're fairly dry here, but then we're in an area that's got pretty good drainage. So, being said, we're supposed to get rain, I think, most of next week. But that is actually a good thing because I'd much rather have predictable weather patterns than unpredictable weather patterns because, yeah, the latter is not fun.
Yeah.
Which is probably a super big incentive for thinking about some of this stuff that Earth Day represents.
Yeah. So the next roundtable discussion, we don't really have a date yet, right? Because it would have been in 2 weeks from now, which is on the same week of the conference.
Yeah, I'm still toying with the idea of whether we could still do one, and because the conference is going to be different, right? Because it's live and we've talked about a few different things, so we can sort of think about it. Because obviously, I don't want it to be difficult for anybody because you guys are all traveling and whatnot too. So don't want it to be overloaded with YouTube for
If it's on Tuesday, if you go on Tuesday like you usually do, I'm fine. I'm only leaving Thursday morning, so I'm good.
Okay. Well, we can chat about it. That would be the plan. It would be the Tuesday. So if we were to
Just
do
let
it.
people know. Right on. So if nobody has any more questions in the chat and you guys don't have anything else to say about Earth Day, we can call it a night. Yeah.
Any more questions or?
I can always talk, so I'm not a good.
I was thinking the same thing too.
Yeah.
Well, you can keep talking if you want. Like, it's giving me watch time, so I don't mind. Plus, it's interesting. So, all right. So we'll call it a night. And thank you, everyone, for being here.
Yes,
and
thank you.
Again, great roundtable.
Thanks so much, everyone, for dropping in.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Take care, guys.
Talk to everyone later.
Bye.